Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Rotaract Club of Achievers Lanka Business School, I welcome you all for the introduction session of Jumpstart 2021. So Jumpstart is our signature project, professional development project, where we give more opportunities to early stage startup as well as mature stage startup, which everyone can participate in. And this year, we are doing it for 5th consecutive year and has a good start for this program.
Recording in progress.
We thought of discussing how important entrepreneurship is and how important it is for our economy as well. So our knowledge partner for this year is Sasnaka Sansada Foundation, and the president of the Sasnaka Sansada Foundation is Mr. Hasitha Wijesundara. Mr. Hasitha Wijesundara has kindly accepted our request to come and educate us on this topic. Speaking of giving an introduction to Mr. Hasitha Wijesundara, he is a renowned international consultant in the trade and private sector development. Currently, he is attached to Curtin Consulting Overseas Projects, LLC, USA, and performs as team leader, trade in USAID fund partnership for accelerating results in trade, national expenditure, and revenue activity. He counts over a decade of experience in SME development, policy matters, micro or SME finance, trade facilitations, regulatory issues, social performance management, and inclusive finance. He holds master's degree in economics and law forms of University of Colombo, a bachelor degree in laws, and bachelor's degree in science. He is also a fellowship with several local and international professional bodies. He is an attorney at law of Supreme Court of Sri Lanka since 2009. Mr. Wijesundara serves as a senior trainer under the U-Lead program and thus far trained over 350 senior level bank officials on SME finance topics. Further to that, he serves as a visiting senior lecturer at several universities and higher educational institutions in Sri Lanka. In addition to this, its experience within Sri Lanka has hands-on experience regionally, being a team member of appraisal missions for sustainable regional economic growth and investment programs, and in Indonesia and promotion of green economic development program in the Philippines. He contributed to the project design and shaping up. So now I'll hand over proceedings to now Mr. Hasitha.
Thanks, Lida. Hope I am audible and you can see me well.
Yes, you're audible, sir.
Okay, so thank you very much. First of all, I would like to extend my warm thanks and gratitude to the Rotaract Club of Achievers to first to cooperate and collaborate with Sasnaka Sansada Foundation, which is a foundation which I am involved, which we do a number of activities. Among one is entrepreneurship, and then of course to invite me for this webinar. One caveat I just wanted to mention, because of the little bit of heavy rain and the weather conditions, sometimes my line might get a little bit interrupted. So if it is so, I would like the coordinators, Lida or Lushini, please let me know in a text message. You can message here, so then I can switch off my camera, and then we can have some sort of a arrangement. Right. So first of all, so today and welcome everybody here. I mean, I'm pretty glad to see around 40 quite young, enthusiastic, young professionals joining this session, which is a quite interesting session. This is actually the first of this series where we want to discuss about entrepreneurship, the business startups, and then the related and associated matters in different angles. So today's session would really gives you a main foundation to all that discussion. So warm welcome of everybody. And today's session is very important. This is a session where you can see the macro picture first. And once you can see the macro picture, then you will be able to understand the rest of the sort of bit and pieces, and you can connect the dots, and then you can take up your entrepreneurial challenge. And start the formal session with my inputs. I would like to extend again a warm hand to both the Rotaract Club of Achievers and as well as the individuals who are presenting here. If you really would like to be involved in this entrepreneurial journey, or maybe startup, or maybe thinking of starting an entrepreneurial venture, maybe after this session also, after this series of sessions, this Jumpstart project, that Sasnaka, Sansada and Rotaract Club can be further support and assist you on different activities. So I know that different other sub projects are being lined up. So stay tuned, and we always, personally myself and all other colleagues and the team members of Sasnaka, Sansada, as well as the Rotaract Club of Achievers will be there to support you, to handhold you, and then at least to show you, or rather providing some sort of a guidance or the mentorship, or maybe a little bit of our insights and thoughts to your activity. So please stay tuned for that. So today's topic, coming back to the topic, it's a very sort of a timely topic. I have basically two areas to discuss, right? I don't want to make this as a sort of a formal lecture or formal sort of a university type lecture here, but would rather like to generate some discussion. So what I would do is that I will do a small talk, maybe within the first 45 minutes or maybe 50 minutes maximum. And then I will open this floor for you, and then to have a very sort of very important and strong and very vivid discussion of what is happening. So the presentation has two parts. Number one is to understand the current economic situation. I think you have been always, in social media and all the newspapers and whatnot, you have seen all the good and the bad. Of course, I must say that the bad news are much more prevalent these days. News of current status of Sri Lankan economy, right? So let us have a basic understanding of where are we and what are the main issues that we are facing. So that is first part of my presentation. And then we little bit go to the concepts of entrepreneurship in a little bit of more abstract way, right? I'm not going to dive into your entrepreneurship ventures and then to tell, okay, what's good or what bad, but at least to understand this importance of entrepreneurship, particularly in a country situation as now. So this is how we are trying to focus our presentation today. And then after that, we will have a discussion, and then we can wrap up the first session for today. And then there will be series of sessions. So Rotaract Club of Achievers will in due time will explain you that we are looking entrepreneurship on different angles. So then we can see how you can get a sort of well-rounded knowledge and insights of the situation. So a little bit trying to understand what is the current situation. Let me try to share my screen. First of all, what I would like to see to address is some of the development or some of the current challenges that Sri Lanka faces, right? I would say Sri Lanka currently faces three types of main challenges. Three types of main challenges, and the fourth challenges is which I understood or which I mentioned here as a system issue or the systemic problem, where we a lot of people discuss about the whole system and then all the issues whatnot. So that's what I wanted to say. So coming back again, that we can see that main three problems we have, and then underline of these three problems there is a bit of a system system issue that we have to address. So before we go into any entrepreneurship venture, or even to be as a sort of individual or as a civil person, or normally we call that as a civic responsibility, we have to understand these issues first. And I know most of you are coming from business background, but there could be some students or some young professionals here who are not really on the business background. So let me try to be simple as much as possible. So I am a senior economist by profession, as Lida said, but on the other hand, let's try to be less abstract, but let's talk a little bit of more common sense. So first of all, the first problem that we can understand is fiscal deficit. Sri Lanka is having a bigger issue in fiscal deficit. So now try to understand, I will remove this slide share again. So what do you mean by this fiscal deficit? So before understanding of the fiscal deficit, you have to understand what do you mean by fiscal means, right? In economics, there are basically, two types of policies that we have in economics. One policy we call fiscal policy, right? I mean, there are a number of other policies, but main two policies are there. Number one is we call the fiscal policy. In Sinhala, we call ayavaya pratipattiya, fiscal pratipattiya. And there's another kind of policy we call the monetary policy, or mulya pratipattiya. So in any economy, the government basically tries to manage the economy by trying to managing these two policies, which is fiscal policy and the monetary policy. So when it comes to fiscal policy, everybody know, I mean, this is nothing to do with economics. This is very much common sense and the general knowledge, right? When it comes to fiscal policy means how government manage its income and expenditure. So that is what this fiscal policy very simply means. Fiscal policy, right? How government would manage its inflows, normally we call aya, and how government manage its outflows, vaya. So how we manage this. So this is we call the fiscal policy. And the responsible authority for fiscal policy is the parliament, right? So for any country's parliament, or normally we call it much more precise way, the legislature is responsible for fiscal policy. So if I try to draw this, I'll take a liberty to take my small board, right? So fiscal policy means, let's say if this is the government or the state, if this is the state, okay, what are the ways that state would get their inflows? What are the ways that the state would get inflows, and how these inflows being spent, right? The outflows. So here a little bit of technical stuff. If you can see in outflows, I just only draw two lines. So that means are there only two outflows? No. It has to understand, it has basically two types of outflows. So that is what I have drawn the two arrows. So first type, for some students, this would be really a good academic exercise. So please recall your economics, right? So first type of outflow we call the capex, or capital expenditure. Capital expenditure. So that means if any state, spend money on capital goods, that we call the capital expenditure. So normally what covers capital expenditure is now, for example, like, building of the roads, or maybe the hospitals, the highways, the schools, the goods or the elements which are of capital in nature. So how to understand what you mean by capital in nature? Number one, they should be one-off. Capital in nature kind of one-off investment. That investment would lead to some goods which is generating future economic benefit. Now let's say, for example, if you build a harbor, it's a one-off thing and it would generate future economic benefit. So that is we call capital expenditure, right? And if you build a hospital, it is one-off thing, but it will give a future economic benefit. So that is we call capital expenditure. And the second type we call recurrent expenditure. Recurrent expenditure. In Sinhala, we call Pragdana Viyadam Saha Punaravartana Vyedam or Vartana Vyedam. So this is very important. So what states does is whatever the income that they get, they will spend this in two ways, either on Pragdana Vyedam, so that means something of more tangible, more capital in nature, one-off things, and other one is recurrent expenditure, Punaravartana Vyedam, and you know the meaning of recurrent, so that means it would happen on every year, on yearly basis. So this is how the spending would look like. While spending is look like here. So what are the inflows? Now we are trying to understand the first issue of the Sri Lankan economy. I mean, again, it's budget deficits, how the budget deficit would take place. So how the money would come to the country? It's number one, which everybody of you know, taxation, tax income, right? Tax is the number one, right? The inflow of money. And then there's another one we call profit or income from SOEs, state-owned enterprises. SOEs, state-owned enterprises, could be Petroleum Corporation, could be Ceylon Electricity Board, could be Telecom, the enterprises that the state has. So the money from the state enterprises. And then if there would be any loan or any I would say any grant, there's again sort of a influx of information, influx of money, and then of course that if any FDI comes. Right, so those are the things. So you can see at any given time there are various inflows to the state, the money, and then the different type of outflows. So this is how the budget is. So what do you mean by budget deficit? I mean, very simple, very much common sense answer. Budget deficit means that the inflows are lesser than the outflows. So on the other hand, outflows are much higher than the inflows. So then you can see a deficit. I mean, in contrast, other type of budget is normally we call the surplus budget. So surplus budget means that the inflows are much higher than the outflows. So if you ask the question, why Sri Lankan budget is in deficit? This is very, very important thing. And colleagues and dear professionals, that I have to tell this without a very, apolitical tone, right? So a lot of people try to understand this or try to comprehend this situation in a much more political way. But let's try to be Sri Lankans. Let's try to be civilianly conscious people, and then try to understand the whole logic. So this budget deficit, very important thing is in Sri Lanka, this is not happened today or yesterday or whatever. This has been in the country for more than last 40 years. So this is a quite acute, long-lasting problem. Meaning, for last 30 to 40 years, as Sri Lanka, we are spending more money than we are earning. We are spending more money than we are earning. Of course, from the early days, we spend a little bit than what we earn, but now the situation has come to a point where we spend a lot more than we earn. So that is the problem. So if you could see, this is a very, very important thing. I'm talking about a normal household, your house. If your expenditure are more than your income, what you're going to do? The system will be not sustainable. Let's say in your household, your monthly income would be, let's say, 100,000, maybe with your parents and then others, everybody's salaries. But then if your expenditure is 150,000, what would happen? How you fill that 50,000 gap? It is very simple common sense. So normally you have to do a few things. Number one, you have to borrow from somebody and then pay for that 50,000. Or you have to sell some of your asset to somebody and then get extra income and then pay for that 50,000, right? Or the balance. Or what you have to do is, on the other hand, if these two options fail, what you have to do is you have to cut your expenditure, right? So this is very simple. And even in a household, okay, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you can do like this. You can borrow and pay, borrow and spend, and then sell and all other. But how long you can do this? That is the problem. So if you can do, if you have to do this, imagine for last 30 years you are doing this. So that is the acute problem that we have. So this problem, every one of you have to understand, it is not one government or one political party's creation. No, it is happened recently. It has been an acute problem. So now we are coming in to a pinnacle of this problem, where now these all problems are now there. So it's very, we could see that nowhere to now to turn. So that is the situation that we are having. Then why this, since I don't want to go into much academics here, but why this expenditure so much compared to our income? So then we have to understand in Sri Lanka, what are our expenditure heads? I try to be very simple here. If you can ask, if I ask you, okay, what are the things that Sri Lanka is spending and all other? So some of you might tell, okay, I don't want to have a discussion now because we have limited time, but you will tell, okay, the loan repayments and then of course corruption and all other stuff, which is very much true. But if you really see what is the real expenditure head of this country, sometimes some of you might not believe, it's to maintaining the Sri Lankan government. Maintaining the Sri Lankan state is the most expensive thing that is happening in the country. I will try to substantiate this with a little bit of statistics. So now if you ask how many government servants we have in this country, so it would be somewhere around 1.5 million. More than 1.5, it should be more than 1.5 million, but at least 1.5 million. For sure, we have government servants. And we have approximately 800,000, 0.8 million pensioners who are getting the pension. So that means approximately 2.3 million people in this country are paid by the government. So they are in the government payroll, right? But on the other hand, if you really see this as a comparison to the country's population, which is 21 million. So 21 million to my country, a population, a population in 2.3 million, right, which is paid by the government. So make a ratio, you could see 18 to 1. So that means every 9th person is paid by the government. Lankawe, if you consider the 8 people and the other person is paid by the government. So that is the problem. So to understand the gravity of that, you might have to understand, okay, what is the international standard or the world standard? If you see on most of the developing countries like Germany, Australia, and even to a certain extent in USA, this ratio is approximately averagely 100 to 1. Some countries it's 150 to 1. So that means after 150 persons, the other person is paid by the government. So in most countries or most developed countries, you could see a lean government. The majority of the jobs are provided by the private sector or the entrepreneurs that we are talking about, not by the government. But unfortunately, due to a lot of reasons, Sri Lankan government so far been the highest or the largest employer of the country. So that has resulted the small amount of money that we are creating, we are spending to maintain the government. And if you can see, who are these government servants? They can be teachers, they can be people with the 3 forces, they can be all the people who are working with Kacheria and all the government ministries and all other, and then all the Pradeshia Sabha, Palat Sabha and all other whatnot. So you can see that these sort of people are paying with the taxpayers' money. So this is actually the main problem of the government. And you could see, my dear colleagues, if this is coupled with the corruption, this problem will be multiplied. Right. So one thing is a problem itself is a huge, or the obesity of the government. We have a very fat state sector government, right? And then we have all the ministers, there are all other, their benefits, there the staff and all other, and with the state employees themselves. And if it is coupled with the corruption and all other, which I consider as a systemic issue, so which is our system issue, which I said at the 4th point. So then the issue is double. So this is actually the first number 1 problem, right? I will not go much detail. You can talk until cows come home on this topic, but I will not go because of the time limitation. Second main problem is our debt repayment. Now, why this debt has been a problem? So we have to understand, at least 10 years ago, Sri Lankan government borrowed a lot of money from China. and some other sources. And then the government invested this money in some of the development project. Very important thing, if you are in investment or if you're in finance, normally we call, I mean, some finance students, maybe you are some CMAs and all of that, you would know, there's something called asset and liability matching. So that means if you want to borrow a loan, that loan has to be invested in an asset where asset would generate income which would enable you would be able to repay the loan. And the duration of the asset and the liability should be more or less same. Because otherwise what would happen is your liability or your loan would be matured, but your asset is not matured. So then you have to pay the liability out of your pocket. ඒක හරියට අපි සාමාන්‍ය තේරෙන භාෂාවෙන් කිව්වොත් බැංකු ඕවර්ඩ්‍රාෆ්ට් එකක් අරගෙන පුතා අපි ගෙයක් හදනවා වගේ වැඩක්. දැන් බැංකු ඕවර්ඩ්‍රාෆ්ට් එක මැචුවර් වෙනවා 1 month වෙනකොට ගේ හදනවා අවුරුදු 6ක් විතර. So then what would happen? That you will not කොහෙන්ද එතකොට සල්ලි තියෙන අතෙන් තමයි ගෙවන්නේ. Because that gay or building or whatever you want to call it. So normally that is not the situation. Normally what we're having is you have to pay out of the asset, the investment. We have invested in Hambantota and all of the ports. We have invested in I'm not talking about politics, think on economic side. We have invested in sort of what you call the airports and all other, and resulted that these projects are not really generating sufficient income. So now the loans are there. And mind you, these loans are very short term. So most of these loans we borrowed somewhere in 2010 and 11, 12, that period, because just after the war ended in 2009. And now it's 2020 comes, now this 2021, next year 2022. Now, you know, by next March, we have to pay 7 billion for the loan, the installment and the interest, right? So then problem is where the funds come to prepay the loan. So that is actually the second problem that we are having. Third problem, why we have a huge outflow here when it comes to recurrent expenditure, all our recurrent expenditure, is that we are having a huge import bill, particularly when it comes to fossil fuel. Of course, dear students, we cannot do anything because that is a systemic issue, because we don't have fossil fuel, so we have to import. Okay, forget about vehicles, forget about all other things. Actually, compared to these, the fuel, that is, they are a little bit lower in amount, but fossil fuel is the most important thing, without which we cannot run the country, fuel and the gas and all of it. So because of all these three black holes, the economy is in severe expenditure mode. But on the other hand, unfortunately, we are having less income from taxation, less income from SOEs, and then of course loans are of course not anyway. I mean, loan you can borrow, but then once you invest, you have to repay that. So that's what you need to have the asset here to repay that, right? But on the other hand, these two are very, very important. I will quickly go to the problem of taxation also in Sri Lanka, right? I don't want to go into much detail on taxation, but taxation in Sri Lanka. Now, in tax, in economics, there are two types of tax, and in finance also. Normally, we call, in finance, you call direct tax and indirect tax. In economics, we call progressive tax and a regressive tax. So, what do you mean by progressive tax? It's tax based on your income. Higher the income, higher the tax. Lower the income, lower the tax. Further lower the income, further lower the tax. And further lower the income, you don't pay tax, but you are getting the tax benefit. So tax is proportionate to your income. So that is actually normally we call the good tax. That's income tax. Direct tax is that. But in Sri Lanka, if you see, actually our taxation is not progressive. If you see in Sri Lanka, most of the rich people, they don't pay tax compared to their income. But how our taxation regime comes, it's mostly from imported goods. Normally we call that we have a consumer-based taxation. Every petrol liter that you are pumping, either to your Lamborghini or a Benz or the V8 or the Land Rover or to the three-wheel or to the motorbike, you are paying the same tax for petrol. If you are eating paripu, if you are in a bigger mansion, bigger house or whatever, or a small house or a shanty or whatever, wherever, you have to pay the same tax. If you are eating bread, same thing. So there, sorry. You could see that in Sri Lanka, we have a taxation where compared to income, mostly the poor people pay more tax than the rich people. It's already number one. So the tax income is less. And on the other hand, unfortunately, our SOEs, due to the system issue, which I said the fourth issue, with the corruption and the system, most SOEs who are supposed to give funds to the government, actually they are draining the funds out of the government. So it is, we are having a revised or situation. So with that, we could see in Sri Lanka, one of the main problem, and I would say that's the single most problem that the country face, which is mother to all problem, is we are spending more than we earn, which we call budget deficit. That is number one problem. Second problem, you can remember if I share my screen, I said second problem is balance of payment deficit. So let's try to understand what is balance of payment. Balance of payment means the difference between imports and export, right? This is very, very, again, other situation. So in balance of payment also we have a deficit. So that means we import more and we export less. So that means import more means dollar outflow from the country is more than the dollar inflow. So that's we call the balance of payment deficit. In our trade account, we pay more dollars or we give out more dollars, and the receipt of dollars are comparatively less. So that's also a very interesting thing to see and understand, but very, very sad and very depressing. Right? Because the thing is, unfortunately, if you really see countries, how country could improve its balance of payment is by improving countries' export base. Now, if you see in Sri Lanka, please Google and do the statistics. You guys are intellectuals. See what is the GDP to export ratio in Sri Lanka. According to World Bank statistics, around 13%. So that means only 13% of the GDP count for exports, which is extremely low. If you see countries, developing countries, or the countries that are in more head in development arena, you could see that those countries would have approximately at least 40% of their GDP is covered through the export. So that means that export to GDP ratio is 40%. So we are not 40%, we are not 30%, we are not even 20%, we are at 13%. So it is extremely low for a country of our nature. So that means our export performance is extremely bad. And one other thing I would like to share. Now, you really see the world development trend, the countries who developed after the World War II, right? You could see starting from Japan, Germany, followed by Singapore, Taiwan, followed by South Korea, Israel, followed by the Thailand, and then the Malaysia. You could see one single correlation. Countries' development is positively correlated to exports. So that is very important. Countries who have exported more tend to be developed more, particularly after the World War II situation. That means somewhere around after 1945, which is of course the period that we got the independence. So it's around 70 to 80 years. So, but in Sri Lanka, initially we had around 35 or 32% of our export to GDP ratio, but it has been now gradually declining to 13%. So if you try to understand what are the reasons for that, we can find three reasons, right? Number one, we have as a country, this is where I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship in my latter part. As a country, we have failed to diversify our export basket, right? So meaning from long period of time, we have been exporting the same goods. For example, like let's say cinnamon and spices. We have been exporting cinnamon and spices since last 3,000, 4,000 years ago. Even Cleopatra's time, we exported cinnamon, right? We still export the cinnamon, and we still export the bale or the very raw type of cinnamon. But of course, there are some things now, some initiatives now are there to add a little bit value, but mostly we are sending raw cinnamon. And mind you, where we send our cinnamon, we are exporting to Mexico, and Mexico is sending our cinnamon to Europe with 300% profit margin. So we are losing on that. Right, so that means we don't really. I'll come back to that other point later. But we have not diversified. Tea, last 400 years we have been exporting teas. So other than in 1990s, where President Premadas introduced this garment factories and the apparel industry added to the Sri Lanka's export basket, I have not seen any progressive move that we diversify our export basket. We have been keep on diversifying the same thing. I mean, to understand this in a little bit on a parallel way, because it's very very important that you have to, we are understanding, or we are thinking this on contemporary terms. Now, look at the example of South Korea. Now, in 1954, after the Korean War, South Korea actually exports very raw stuff. One of the raw stuff, I've been in South Korea in 2013-14, and what they said, the economists, they said is that they have exported the wigs of these ladies, the girls, to the dolls of United States, and that is they are one of the very important export items. We can make konde tamai dolls at egolo away. 1954 Korea as they start their export. But now they have gradually then developed, and now you can see how the export basket have been diversified. Every other person of you have now Samsung phone. Now LGs and all other are much even better sometimes than the Japanese electronics, right? And you can see even Kia Motors, the Kia interior, some of the Japan Japanese vehicle interior Kia. So you can see that the export basket, how they have developed. Another example is Thailand. Now, the Thailand world is like a world kitchen here, right? Because what they have done was they have exported all the spices and then all other stuff for the, for the kitchen. But now or kitchen in the sense, for the cooking and culinary things. But yeah, now the country which manufactured more Toyota cars are not in Japan, it's in Thailand, right? So Thailand, now they have gradually developed themselves to the light engineering, to the electronics, and to the vehicles, and to they have developed. The Anit Ratawal, once they diversify their export market with the essence of entrepreneurship, Sri Lanka actually lagged behind. So that is number one. Number two with exports is we did not diversify our export market. Because if you see in international trade, it's very important to have a positive trade balance. So positive trade balance means you are earning from that particular thing. That means we send goods and they will pay us. And trade is other way around. We get the goods and we pay for them, right? So if you see the countries that we have positive trade balance, it's only still America and Europe. Right? We have not diversified our export market. So that is again the problem with America and Europe say something. That is why we are very scared. Some of the people in the government, they don't want to show, but if they shut the door of us, and we will be hanging ourselves. We will be having a lot of difficulties, because it would be very difficult if they say, no, your apparels are not allowed, your garments are not allowed, your tea are not allowed. But the thing is, if we don't export them, there are a number of people in the queue who wanted to export those items to those countries or richer countries, right? So we don't have a lucrative competitive advantage there, unfortunately. So that's why we are very scared of America and very scared of Europe, because of them we are sustaining to a certain extent. So that's the thing, right? So please understand this contemporary thing without any other prejudice, right? So this is very important. So that is what export market. So now the BRIC countries are coming, CVET countries are coming, next 11 countries are coming, Africa is developing, and we are not apparently taking much of the effort to diversify our export markets to those countries. That is third one. Second one. Third one, which is linked to the first one, is that our less value addition. As a country, we still export goods which are of less value added. Still the cinnamon are export mostly on bale cinnamon. So still the tea are mostly sold as bulk tea, but the value addition, despite of very minor initiatives by few people, we do that. So with all these, what we can see is our balance of payments is also deficit. So you can see now we are having a double cliff. Right? So you can right? So we have a double cliff. One is on fiscal side, which is the difference between inflows and outflows, and other one is on the balance of payment side, that is actually between import and export, right? I will quickly go to the third point. If you can see the third one, if I share my screen, aging population and system issues. So please remember these two, and I will withdraw my screen. Again, aging population. So that is also a very interesting point. Now, I don't know, I mean, here I could see, a lot of young people here, but unfortunately, Sri Lanka, our population is aging. If you really see what's the average age of Sri Lankan is now, it's almost 40 years. Almost 40 years, right? So our population is aging. So if somebody asks, okay, yes, what are the reasons? Which is the aging population is of course synonymous with the developed country, which is true. Yes, to a certain extent, yes, that's correct. Why? Because we have quite a reasonable, good healthcare system. Our longevity is high, so people are living longer. Actually, there's a myth that now the people are living shorter period, but those days people live long, which is not really true, right? So actually, those days people died earlier, right? Which were not reported, but people died later. Because the thing is, even the people, they got heart attacks and all of that. Was like Kaurud done the cholesterol done heart attack done paralyzed right? And you die. And nobody knows what to do. And now you have all these stuff, the medication and all of that. So if you even with acute diabetics, you can live, and with all the heart surgeries, and you can live. So our health system is good. So that means the people's age is it's been pushed to that side. And due to education, Sri Lanka is a quite literate country. Due to education, due to family planning, and then all of that, our reproductive rates also quite less, because we are quite aware of family planning and all of that. So that our reproduction is also, which is about around 1% our population growth rate. So on one hand, lower population growth rate and the longevity of the people due to the proper good health had resulted our mean age, I think වයසේ මධ්‍යන රේඛාව අර වැඩි පැත්තට එහෙම 40 පැත්තට move වෙලා තියෙන. So it has been moved around 40 years of age. Now the problem is this. So you could argue with me, okay, so that's good. And it's like an aging population. So wasn't this aging population is a synonym or indication of a good thing? Yes, true. But the problem is this. This is $1 million question. Most of these countries, particularly Japan, if you see Japan and Germany, their population became aged after they became rich. So that means after their economic transformation, their demographic transformation population. So first they had the economic transformation, followed by a demographic transformation. And the reverse again. In Sri Lanka, we have the demographic transformation is already taking place, but our economic transformation is not going to take. Make a hariyata something like right? What would happen if you are too old, you cannot do anything, but you are still very poor? I don't want to tell what would happen to you or maybe your parents or your grandparents if they don't have any helping hand. They're very poor and they're very, very, very old. So that is what we have to do. So with that, I would say the current situation in Sri Lankan economy is not that great, right? I have to admit that. Number one, we have a huge fiscal deficit. Number two is we have a huge BOP deficit. And number three is we are having aging population. The problem of aging population is two types. Number one is aging population means we have to spend more money for healthcare. That is number one. Number two, who would support this elder population is the younger population. So if the younger population or the working population is comparatively lower than the general population, so that means small amount of you have to work so hard to maintain your elderly population. So that is again a burden to the company. And the third point is if a population is aging, very important thing in international trade, which is the labor competitiveness. That means competitiveness to cheap labor, we don't have that benefit. So that means we are an expensive country. We are a labor expensive country. That would result less of foreign direct investment. If you really study FDIs, the pattern of FDIs, a lot of people those days thought FDIs comes through because of the corruption, because lack of corruption, good political system and all of that. But now increasing, we have seen not other than not those things. FDIs mostly come and attracted to cheap labor. Countries who are having cheap labor, you could see FDIs, unless otherwise the country is in deep mess. Now, for good example is Vietnam. Vietnam is not a democratic country. It's a communist country. It is not free market economy, but a lot of people go and invest in Vietnam because of cheap labor. Why Bangladesh is thriving? Because of cheap labor. Why you get a lot of investment to other countries like Laos and all other. Of course, Myanmar has a different issue with the military leadership. But still, what's happening is why this is that they are having the cheap labor. right? So all these are now having problem. And the final issue is our system issue, which is actually, I would say, the lethargy of the people who don't want to change this system progressively. So that's what I would say, the system issue. System because that is also very big problem. Because the thing is, if you really see, we got our universal franchise in Sarvajana Chandabalaya somewhere around 1931, and we got a very mature democracy. But still, if you see the people's attitudes of changing this for good, taking a risk and making a sacrifice and change, I think without any political biasness, I think we are not ready yet. We are not at least our generation. Our generation and your parents' generation are not there. So that's what I would really urge you as a younger generation. You have to think a little bit more strongly on this one. Right. Now you understand the problems of the Sri Lankan economy, right? Very briefly, I mean, I mind you, this is actually 1 month's lecture, right? I did it very, very briefly, and this is like a machine gun, right? So, but if you need more information, more detail, more granularity, I would really recommend that we'll have a different session, right? To understand each one of these very granularly, because if you are a business student, if you are coming from economics background, or even if you are an engineer or a lawyer or whatever, it's very, very important, because this is a civil knowledge that you should have, right? Now, let me talk a little bit of entrepreneurship. This is very, very important. So you could see again, what are the problems? Why, I mean, to most of these problems, most of these issues, entrepreneurship is very important element. What do you mean by entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is ability to create wealth. Now, what is happening in Sri Lanka is that small people, small amount of entrepreneurs are feeding the fat government. So we have to reverse this. And what we have to do is, rather than job seekers, we have to find, or we have to create job creators. Rather than wealth seekers, we have to create wealth creators, which is very, very much entrepreneur, which is very much of entrepreneurship. So with this one, I would like to share you one very important slide. I don't know whether I will be able to. Oh yeah, now this one. So now here, forget about the left side. Looking to the right side of this screen share. So this is what I would like to see. I mean, I would like every one of you to be very serious on. This is actually, it's about the Sri Lankan map, which was drawn by a person called Ptolemy in somewhere around 300 before Christ. Now, this map normally we call map of Taprobana. Taprobana, you know, it is actually a name which is synonymous with Sri Lanka. Tambapanni, Tambrapanni, Taprobe, and Taprobana. So that's how it has been changed. So this is about Sri Lanka. But then you could again ask, okay, how you confirm this? The map which you can see on the right side of your screen is Sri Lanka. To give more information, you can see even the details of this map. The problem is the metaphor, I would say the morphology of the country or the island is different, because you know Sri Lanka, it's not like this, right? But on the other hand, if you see in topmost, you can see somewhere it's called the Dambakola Patuna. That means the Jaffna Varaya harbor you can see. And here you can see other harbor, which is we call Gokana Tirthe. Gokana Tirthe means in the Trincomalee. And here you can see the Mahatirtha. That means the Mana, the harbor. And here you can see the Magama or the Ruhuna, in Tisamaharama, that area, the harbor, right? So all the 4 harbors, including some here in Eastern province, I think this is Oluvilla or somewhere, right? You can see all the 4 harbors in the country. And you can see, like, you know, the Mahaveli Ganga is there. Of course, these are on different names. Here you can see the Malvatoya is here. Here you can see the Manik Ganga or Nilvala Ganga is here. So all, and here you can see the Yangoya, right? And all these things you can see, which is very much similar to the Sri Lankan things, but of course with different names. And even you can see, if you really go to the granular level, within the middle of the country, you can see even the Sri Park there. So that means that the middle of the country, the mountains are also there. So long story short, Ptolemy has drawn this country, this map, in somewhere around 300 before Christ, because Ptolemy is very much synonymous with King Alexander the Great, right? So King Alexander the Great is similar to Chandragupta Maurya, so a similar period. So Chandragupta Maurya was the father of King Bindusara, and Bindusara's son was Ashoka's son was Mahinda, and Araha Mahinda actually brought the Buddhism to this country in somewhere around 230 before Christ. So I'm talking about 300 years before Christ here, right? So what you have to understand, dear professionals and the colleagues, is that this picture, while Ptolemy drawing this picture, Ptolemy doesn't know how even the world is look like. And mind you, during this period, no one thought even the world is round. Because world is round, I mean that's actually, it's been initial hypothesis came by Galileo Galilei somewhere around 1600, and the people might have thought the world is flat. And you can see on top the north, the India. So why the India is small and the Sri Lanka is apparently big? So this is the $1 million question you have to ask. Why Sri Lanka is so big, and why India is relatively small? So this is a very good example of historically how Sri Lanka positions, right? Because we position in a very strategic location of Indian Ocean, where we've been a hub of international maritime trade. We've been a hub of international maritime trade. So that means our entrepreneurship spirit, entrepreneurship culture was very eminent on those days. So that is where that Ptolemy has drawn that big, like a big Sri Lanka compared to India, because we were so prominent in international trade. And if you see the attention to detail in that map is Sri Lanka. So that means how Ptolemy got those things, because there are a lot of traders who travel to Sri Lanka and travel to Europe and travel to India through the Silk Road, and he got this information. Okay, apparently there's a country like this, a paradise, this has been these details, and we have been there not because of anything but for trade. So you can see the trade, international trade. Trade means import and export. The entrepreneurship, it was in very vital in our system. So sometimes I have the feeling that a lot of people, a lot of students think that we are not an entrepreneurial nation. No, we were a very much of entrepreneurial nation. And our success is all about entrepreneurship. Do you think this whole bigger like stupas or the complex like Ruan Valisaya or maybe Abegiriya basically built just because of agriculture? No. If you see Abegiriya, I mean, you cannot believe the whole complex of Abegiriya. Abegiriya, it's not that stupa itself; it's a whole university's complex, and that is developed by international trade. If you go into a little bit more granular in economic archaeology, you can see Sri Lanka was an entrepreneurial nature. So we are entrepreneurial nation, entrepreneurial country. So that is what we also have to do, because everybody of us, we have to understand this concept of competitive advantage. And what is our competitive advantage is our location. So location-based competitive advantage, location-based trade is our salvage. So that is where I would like everybody of you to think entrepreneurially, and then think this entrepreneurship is not a new thing. Entrepreneurship is it's a thing that is being inherited with us, but unfortunately, due to a lot of reasons, during the period of what you call the colonial period, that entrepreneurial spirits actually has been gone from our genes. In the entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurship develop. We have built and we have had such prosperity of I'm not talking, and I don't want you to be indulged with the history and say, okay, we did that time, this and all other, which we have nothing now. But we have to understand what were our competitive advantage, why we were so successful, why we were such prosperous, not only because of agriculture. Agriculture played a huge role, but other than that, it's about entrepreneurship. It's a business that we did. We were a business hub. We were a maritime hub. in the middle of Indian Ocean. That is very well testimonied by the Ptolemy's map. So that is what, my dear colleagues, I want you to tell or to understand. So then coming back, so you can see, importance of entrepreneurship. So I'm coming back. Role of entrepreneurship. Number one, that what you have to do is to create the mindset, entrepreneurial mindset, which of course are very much essence of this webinar or the series of achievers, where you create with several initiatives, you can understand the entrepreneurial mindset. And the second one is the competitive advantage. And this is also, my dear students, very, very important other point, competitive advantage. So that means what is your uniqueness compared to others? It's very important as individual, as a business, as a country, you understand what is your competitive advantage. And I mind you, I can be assured that with other webinars, you might be able to understand a little bit on this, and then you can a little bit reflect back of competitive advantage. Number one is mindset, competitive advantage. And the third one is risk appetite. So that means ability to take risk and the willingness of taking risk. Unfortunately, because of this laid back behavior of the nation, a lot of people want government jobs. They can pension, state obesity, mindset, what you have to do is, okay, because the thing is making under bad, because if the state is so obese, it will paralyze soon. So what you have to do is you have to take a decision. You have to be entrepreneurial rather than job seeker. You have to be a job creator. You have to create wealth. Any nation who create wealth would be powerful. And I mean, power comes with money. Power comes with affluence. So why not we do that? Those days we were there because of that. We managed to be suffering for a longer period in international ocean despite our mega big India, because we were economically strong. But now you can see we are going and begging from these countries, and we are economically also deprived. So we might not be able to save the world, everybody of us. But before I conclude, I know I've been talking too much now. Before I conclude, but I would like you to think a little bit on this importance of entrepreneurship. Any country of the world develop because of two things. Number one is innovations. Number two is entrepreneurship. These two going hands in hands, which actually Sasnaka, that's what we are focusing on STEM education, which is leading to innovation and as well as entrepreneurship, because this has to be imparted in young people's mind. You have to be wealth creators. You have to think differently. You have to seek opportunities. You have to seek risk, and you have to be entrepreneurial always, right? You might not come up with a business for yourself, but you are entrepreneurial where you can think and create more wealth. So this is what I would like to make you notice in this session, right? And then try to be entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurship is very, very important for any country's development, particularly at a time that Sri Lanka, we are having this sort of problems in all fronts. The impact of entrepreneurship is very, very important. So please make sure that with this webinar series, which is coming, you take adequate knowledge, adequate inspiration to become entrepreneur. But on the other hand, I have to tell this, and I will wind up my session. Maybe not everybody of you can be entrepreneur. Right? But what you can do is you can be entrepreneurial. You understand the concept of entrepreneurial. That means think differently, seek opportunities, exploit the situation, understand your competitive advantage, try to improve your competitive advantage, because competitive advantage is a very important thing. That's what Michael Porter said, right? Competitive advantage today is not competitive advantage tomorrow. Competitive advantage is very agile thing. It's very changing. It's like permanent white water, right? So if you really want to be competitive, you always have to be you have to keep your battery charged. You have to always be alert of what is happening. So that is where what I would like to tell you is that you keep on your battery charge, keep on continuous development, keep on learning, keep on studying, keep on pushing your limits, and try to be entrepreneurial. A nation with a very solid entrepreneurial base is nation that has been developed. Development is not measured by the roads and the hospitals and all are, of course, some parts of development, but development is really measured of how sustainable the country's human resource develop, how ability of a human resource to generate money or generate wealth. It's a very important parameter of entrepreneurship. So having said that, I know it's a quite overwhelming session. So and with a little bit of economics and more of common sense and general knowledge, and I hope that you got some insights. So first one, again, I'm wrapping up. We try to understand the main current issues of Sri Lankan economy: budget deficit, BOP deficit, aging population, and the systems issue. Which for all these, one of the main answer is to develop entrepreneurship. The entrepreneurship, it's nothing new to us. It has been with our nation for a long period of time. We have been very famous for that, and we have created a lot of wealth because of that entrepreneurship, because of the business, because of the trade that we have done. It's again your mindset. Change your mindset. Try to push your limits. Try to develop your competitive advantage. Try to work on that. And try to take risk, and that would lead you to become entrepreneur, you to become successful, and at the end of the day, it would become our nation and our country also successful. So with that, I would like to give the opportunity for the moderators, and if there would be any questions, I'm happy to answer or discuss and generate a small discussion around that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful words. Now we'll move forward with the question and answer. So participants, you all may unmute yourself and ask questions, or you all can put it in the chat box. So Loshni will direct to Mr. Hasitha.
Okay, I've got a question in my personal chat, so I'll direct it to you, sir. So the question is, how will entrepreneurship solve the problem of too many government employees and debt repayment?
Okay, good question, right? But you have to understand it's like this. So entrepreneurship is not a quick fix, right? Today you become entrepreneur, then you will not going to answer none of these questions. But let me try to unwrap this question in this way. If most of our population be entrepreneurial and have the mindset of not to depend from the government, right? That would, in long run, will hopefully will reduce or will have less motivation for young people to join in government job. Can you believe some of my master's students? It's sad to say, they basically forgot, or they earned a salary of 100,000 in a private sector, and can you believe that they joined to the government sector for 25,000 salary because of the pension? Pension mangawa මොකද යන්නේ කියලා ලක්ෂයක විතර salary එකක් දාලා රුපියල් 25000 පඩියට යනවා නැස pension එක තියෙනවා කියලා. I do not have any I really throw it to my feet. They have the concept of time value of money. The time value of money, I mean, we have to understand some of these engineers, maybe like Malshans might not know this concept of time value of money. It's very important. Money can, it's time, and time value of money is a very important concept that you have to know, because having 25,000 salary and having 100,000 salary is two different things. And if you see, and if you really inflate that or rather discount that with the inflation, you could see there being a government servant, that is the problem. So that is one thing, right? So I would say that mindset change would, in long run. Again, what you have to understand, for long-term problems, you cannot have short-term answers. For long-term problems, you have to address that a long-term problem. So that is why you guys, that is why Sasnaka Sansada, we are working with schools, we are working with universities, we are working with young population, because for long-term problems, we cannot have short-term answers. That is number one. And number two, if you're entrepreneur means what? You create wealth, you create ability to give more employment, right? So then people would, you create wealth, you create employment, which will enable the country to gain more. And perhaps if you can do an export business, right? You might not be able to do export right away, but if you do export business, then you will do a lot more contribute to the country's BOP, situation in long run. So my answer is, again, you become entrepreneur, will not save the world now. Correct. But on the other hand, you become entrepreneur in long run would have a positive impact to the nation and for the country. So that is my answer for that. Okay, there's a question, Lucy, in the chat box,
yes.
right?
I'll just read it out. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, sir. Any advice you can give on the fear of entrepreneurship to us youngsters? In the sense, some of us might feel that if we start up a business, it will just bring more problems, then peace in our minds, and we are just asking for trouble. I believe that could be the mindset of some youngsters as well, as which would demotivate them from pursuing entrepreneurship. What are your thoughts on that?
Very, very low. I think Buddha, you are Oshada, you are spot on, right? So no, that is the thing. Now earlier, those days we had that entrepreneurship spirit. So that's what we push the limits and we try to take a burden, we try to take trouble, and then we try to achieve something. But what had happened, I mean, this is my personal hypothesis, maybe I may be wrong, that with the colonialization and all other, we as a nation become very, very complacent. We have been very complacent. We did not, push hard. We do not understand the meaning of hard work. We do not believe that hard work will pay off. We don't believe the law of the farm, which is that means that to get some result, you have to be work very hard and all of that. So which I think it's that is actually with those things, our whole nation, particularly my generation and little bit less, but to a certain extent, your generation is paralyzed. Because what do you say? Why you take such risk? Why you take such burden? If you ability to work and do some small stuff for a politician and you can secure a permanent job. Actually, that is the problem. Now, problem is that we have reached to a situation where the system cannot sustain. This system will burst, and this will happen sooner or later, because this will not happen. So for Oshada, what I would say is, Buddha, so those are the things, but then as youngsters, you have to understand few things. Number one, in the world, there's nothing called quick fixes, right? Quick fixes now, right? It's hard work. Right, and if you want to, the law of the farm, right? If you want to have mangoes, you have to plant mangoes and you have to keep manuring the tree for a longer period. Then you will get the mangoes, right? And then there is no substitute to hard work and the commitment. So that is where that I would say, as you correctly said, that we have to change this mindset. So there is an enormous effort we have to do to laundering the mindset of these people. So that is where what I like from the Achievers, the Rotaract Club, what we are trying to do is to do that. But you might not be able to do is 100%, but at least you are trying to do that. And what I'm kindly requesting from the young graduates and undergraduates here is to work on that, work with that spirit and develop by yourself, because then don't think that, I mean, our typical government thing is no, more work, more problem, less work, less problem, no work, no problem, right? I thought always think and push hard, push boundaries, then you will be successful. Any other question?
Yes, there's one. Time value of money would encourage to take lump sum now. In that context, entrepreneurs make a profit after several years. First years would be loss. So how to raise capital to pay for the losses?
Yeah, good question. So if you know the finance, you would know you are risking your capital, but the thing is you are getting return in long run, and that return would be exponential return. So that's the thing. Right now, for example, think on the Ambagaha story. Right, you plant Ambagaha, palaya, and then you manure, and then there will be a time that I mean, if you really do that there will be some flowering and all other stuff, and then from there onwards you will or reasonable period you will get the money, get the house, and at that time you can get the harvest. If it's if it is too much, you can sell and you can get the benefit, right? So again, similar like that, in entrepreneurship, initially the problem is there are a lot of teething problems. I understand. And Sri Lanka, one other problem is that there's no proper mentorship during that problem, which is actually in Sasnaka Sansada in future. We will tell you that we will create a. I'm inviting Rotaract Club members of achievers also to get involved. We are creating a platform, right, which is sort of maybe called Meet My Mentor platform, because that is very much lack. Because once you are having that sort of a situation, you need mentorship, you need hand holding, you need more support until you come to a certain level. So I agree with you. So in that situation, you have to be very resilient, you have to be very strong, stay focused, and then only you will get the money. But if you do, but don't think like, okay, we put money now, we don't have chunk money, and in future, but in future, the problem will be, the return will be exponential. So don't forget that.
So I have a personal question.
Yeah.
So youngsters play a major role in entrepreneurship in any country. So at present, in Sri Lanka, I don't know whether everyone has this view, but I think a lot of youngsters are going abroad. Right, most potential and hardworking students, they are just going abroad, and we are also encouraged to do that in our households, our relatives. It's like a big problem nowadays. So, what would you like to tell the persons who are confused?
Okay, that's a very political question, right? I have to be. It's like this. What I would say is migrating is very much of a personal decision, right? Whether you migrate or not, it's a very much of personal decision, and you have to take it with extreme care of your personal satisfaction. Not very much. You have to less influence from your parents. Of course, you can listen to them, or even me, or maybe other people also. Let me try to this is not really entrepreneurship, but let me, since there are quite a lot of youngsters here. So in my career, I have traveled almost 40 countries in this world. Been a economist and been working for Deloitte consultancy, because Deloitte is one of the world's best consultancy firms, so the business people would know. And with my involvement with the United Nations International, I came to travel a lot of countries. My feeling, this is my very personal feeling, right? My personal feeling is, as I told, I don't want to use this word, but since it's fine, the shit is everywhere. Only the skin color is different, right? Don't tell that you don't find shit in other countries. Shit is everywhere. Skin color might be different, right? So that means in those countries also you will have the same problem. But having said that, in those countries that you have a particular system, so where even though there are shit here and there, you would be able to maneuver through, which is in Sri Lanka, which is difficult because we don't have that, as I told, that we have a systemic problem. Because Sri Lanka is a country where you need contacts to do a lot of things, right? You have to know you anduran a person in police. You have to know you anduran a person in the hospital. Or andurum kamak, it's fine. So that is bad in Sri Lanka, I know that. But other countries, as the problem is, the situation is which more systemic. That is one thing. Okay, that is number one. So, but on the other hand, so what I want to tell is, do not ever think going abroad will make your life 100% better, or you are going heaven like that. Because again, you have to understand that the people who are migrating, let's be very honest, they are not telling the bad side of their life. They always in Facebook and all other, they tell all the good things. Nobody would like to say the bad things, no, right? So if you think on their life, you have to think. But on the other hand, then again, what I would like to see on what is your contribution. If you think that you can contribute, be in other country, contribute to yourself, contribute to your parents, contribute to your mankind, then take that decision, no worries. But if you think that your contribution would be much more better in Sri Lanka, even with a lesser salary, it's up to your thing, right? I will conclude this remark. This one of the remark of one of my very important or very good friend of migration. It's in Sinhala, so please excuse me for using that, but for your knowledge. So what he said is, what ලංකාවේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය දුකසේ සැප විඳිනවා. If you migrate and if you're in another country, ඒ කට්ටිය සැපසේ දුක විඳිනවා. අපි දුකසේ සැප විඳිනවා, ඒගොල්ලෝ සැපසේ දුක විඳිනවා. So it's up to you to decide whether you would like to be a සැපසේ දුක විඳින්නද නැත්නම් දුකසේ සැප විඳින්නද ඕනේ කියලා. You have to take your own personal call, but again, don't influence what I said. It's very much of a personal decision. Gehan, I think you have raised your hand. No, Wijesundara?
Yeah. Gehan?
Yeah, I just have a few questions. Quickly make it short since we have a lack of time. I just want to know, sir, you spoke about like how the import and export businesses are growing, but currently at a budget deficit because we are importing more, and that seems to be a huge problem. And I think recently most people are trying to get more raw materials and stuff from outside because certain laws pertain, like the agriculture banned and certain chemical fertilizers being banned. There's a huge issue in our country. How important do you think for in a business perspective is supply chain management? For example, whether it be online or like whether it's the physical business that you're actually running, how important of a role does supply chain management play? And in other aspects, how important is like patenting your products, right? For example, there's always issues or legal concerns that occur, right? So how important are supply chain and patenting those your business? So that's a question I want to raise.
Yeah. Thank you, Gehan. It's a very important question. I think the supply chain security and the logistic will be very, very important in any trade, right? So I mean, unfortunately, supply chain management, supply chain security, the knowledge and the even at degree levels that we have quite less. And of course, I mean, I know there are a few people who are following degrees in logistics because this is very, very important thing, right? Because logistics, I don't want to go into much detail. Logistics is much beyond than international trade. Logistics is all about warehousing, it's all about packaging, it's about labeling, it's about storage, it's about managing the things and all of that. So actually, in Sri Lanka, we could be a logistics hub, not international trade hub. Actually, we could be a logistics hub. So logistics, supply chain security, supply chain management, no doubt, 100% will be very important. Either you are in Sri Lanka or in any other country, that you have to work on entrepreneurship and international trade. That is number one. Other question is the patenting. Yes, patenting is also very important because the thing is in I would say the modern economy, everybody is driving on self-actualization. So unless you have some sort of assurance of your original idea, which is protected by patent, a lot of people don't want to come and provide a lot of innovations. Because for what? Because if you come and give, produce innovation or give innovation, you as an original thinker, original thought leader of that innovation, you would be able to get the benefit. Very good example is when I was in London, I have seen in London archives the letter where James Watt had written to Queen Victoria. And I'm talking about mid-1800. You know who is James Watt? James Watt was the person who discovered the steam engine. James Watt in 1800 said to Queen Victoria in a letter saying, okay, my dear Queen, I have this sort of idea of a steam engine which can, revolutionize the whole economy. But can you make sure if I give this and if I develop this and if I give my thoughts, can you protect my rights? Can I get the benefit of that thought? And mind you, I have seen to my naked eye what is Queen Victoria's reply. Queen Victoria's reply said, dear Mr. Watt, I fully understand your concern. This is happening not now, 1830s. I fully understand your situation. Please come up with a novel idea. Please come up with innovation. And my government, I mean the majesty of the government, my government will make sure that you will be protected with your rights and all the rightful claims to you will be granted by my government, and I will support for that. And mind you, Gehan, so that is actually the stepping stone for the James Watt to develop the steam engine. And steam engine was the milestone of industrial revolution in Europe. So you could see in that small letter and the small reply in patent, and they don't have even the word of patent, had paved the way for second or the industrial revolution. So as of now, there's no doubt patenting is very important. Coming back to Sri Lanka, intellectual property law is not bad, but it's not very strong also, right? But you cannot say it's a very weak law. We have a strong law, but as of other things, we have issue of enforcement of the law. But on the other hand, we are not that bad. So patenting is possible. Patenting is very important, and it will be some sort of a motivation for entrepreneurs to be much more entrepreneurial and produce more goods.
So there's one question. Do we have patent rights in Sri Lanka, and what's the duration?
We have patent. I mean, I don't understand the question that properly. We have a patent law. Yes, we have a patent office. So that's called NIPO. That is National Intellectual Property Office, right? NIPO, National Intellectual Property Office, NIPO, right? And then you can see in the Facebook and all. In internet and all other. So you can claim your patent. You can get a patent. That's possible, right? And once you have the patent, you can have the patent right. But there are two problems. Number one is to get a patent in Sri Lanka compared to other countries. Sri Lanka, it takes a lot of time because patent is a little bit of a legal thing, and you have to file a lot of documents, the forms, and all of that. So which is actually a bit of a cumbersome thing. I know some students, and even since Sasnaka, Sansada, there are some students who are having patents, right? So getting a patent it's quite a cumbersome thing, but not impossible thing. You can do. Problem is when it's come to the violation of patent, again the enforcement of the law is I have to admit that is actually one. I'm sorry, I just got knocked off by the internet connectivity.
No problem.
So what I wanted to tell is for patent rights, there is an organization, and then it's called NIPO, and then we have the patent law.
There aren't any questions. So Lydia, can you proceed?
Yeah. And then again, I thank Mr. Hasitha and Sasnaka Sansada Foundation for the support that you give us for this event to success, and also for the all participants who joined at this evening. And thank you for supporting, and thank you for clarifying our doubts. And I hope it's a beneficial. I hope that it was a beneficial session for you all, and it very helpful for me as well in personal life, like how the entrepreneur and how we should keep our roles to be done. So thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, to participate in this, and stay tuned for coming up sessions. Thank you.